Notice the Venezuelans celebrating the kidnapping of Maduro are white and outside of Venezuela. Notice how the Venezuelans who are supporting Maduro and the Bolivarian Revolution are black, brown, indigenous, and inside of Venezuela. And that's no coincidence. Many of the asylum seekers and immigrants that come to America from Latin America are right-wing reactionaries. And they're not good actors. And oftentimes, we don't ever ask the question of what these immigrants were doing before they arrived in America in their home countries. This is especially the case when we're talking about Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. When I hear a Nicaraguan say that they fled communism and they oppose the Sandinista revolution, I think, oh, contra. Whenever I hear a Cuban in Miami talk about Castro and communism and socialism, I think, what were you doing under Batista when the country was a capitalist, criminally ran narco state? Were you part of the class and demographic that was oppressing, discriminating, and unaliving black and brown Cubans? Same thing in Venezuela. Were you the neoliberal Venezuelans that support privatization and were comfortable with the U.S. being in Venezuela, serving as its place of operations throughout the Cold War? That's why Miami's so racist. That's why Miami's so right-wing. That's the people who left those countries. And we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room of who's celebrating the kidnapping of Maduro. Venezuelans in Venezuela oppose the kidnapping of Maduro, U.S. intervention, and support the Bolivarian Revolution. And we need to focus on them, then on Venezuelans who are literally outside of Venezuela in Miami and in Buenos Aires.
Venga por mí. Aquí lo espero en Miraflores. No se tarde en llegar, cobarde.
Amor. Ay, no. Mira eso.
Mira ya, mira lo que...
Being from Miami is crazy because if I mention anything about Israel, half my city comes from my neck. If I mention anything about Venezuela, half the city comes from my neck. Anything about Cuba, half the city comes from my neck. But that's just that city. Outside, we all are able to see clearly about what's happening going on in Cuba, Venezuela, and Israel. But don't ask people from my high school that because they will smite me.
Este es un llamado a los organismos internacionales. ¿Dónde están, carajo? ¿Dónde están? Todos juntos vamos a salir a defender la patria, porque esta patria es nuestra, esta patria es de nuestras próximas generaciones, esta patria es de nuestros hijos y merece que nosotros brindemos y ofrendamos la vida por ella, porque Venezuela es nuestra, Venezuela se respeta. Pónganse alertas, comunidades, porque no vienen por nosotros, vienen por el petróleo y van por ustedes también. Entiéndanlo, que ellos aquí quieren petróleo para continuar sus guerras. Entiendan que ellos aquí quieren nuestras tierras para poder seguir alimentando guerras. No son un ejército de paz. La hora de la tierra es la hora de la chiquita y aquí nos vemos, compatriotas, defendiendo la tierra. Esta tierra es nuestra. ¡Viva Venezuela!
You know, I took some time to reflect and think, and I really do think we need to do a better job at centering the voice of Venezuelans. Let's take a look at what actual Venezuelans on the ground have reported.
Sentirse asustado como todo amaneció el venezolano como tal el día de hoy y en la madrugada que muchas familias no pudieron dormir como tal. La experiencia, yo que he estado en la calle, me vengo regresando de Maracay hasta la capital, todo ha estado trancado, todo ha estado muy mal.
Ellos son los que imponen la ley, pues. son los policías del mundo. Policías asesinos, porque son asesinos. Eso no son personas normales.
Si se lo llevaron, opino que no debería haber sido así, pues, ¿verdad? Porque, como se dice, va a crear un conflicto peor que lo que está ahorita. Y más que con ese bombardeo y eso, bueno, hay que salir, como dijeron, que salieran todos a la calle, a defender a la patria, a defenderlos a todos.
Please understand that the people of Venezuela are not a monolith. Just like here in America, there are right-wing Venezuelans who are pro-regime change and pro-privatization of nationalized resources. And when you're telling me to center the voice of people who think unaliving 50 people in an airstrike to kidnap a head of state is acceptable, when you're telling me to listen to the people celebrating in Chile or Miami, or people that look like this, not the actual people that are affected by a privatization of Venezuela's vast resources, I would say that you're probably centering the wrong voices and listening to the wrong people. Have you ever wondered why the United States plays world police, especially in its own backyard? Why does it have a habit of kidnapping presidents, overthrowing democracies, and backing dictators, all in its own backyard? Well, the answer isn't just greed or power. It's part of it, but it's a rule book, and it was written 2 centuries ago and is still in use today. It's called the Monroe Doctrine, and it's the original blueprint to justify pillaging and plundering for the empire. Now, it all started in 1823. President James Monroe sends a message to Europe. No new colonies, no old world monarchies here. And let's kind of read between the lines here. It wasn't about protection. It was a property claim. The blueprint was drafted, and then in 1904, Theodore Roosevelt expanded it. He called it the Roosevelt Corollary. So basically, if a nation in the US's hemisphere was misbehaving, so too poor, too unstable, too indebted, America had the right to be its international police power, to police, to control, to extract. Then came the Cold War. The doctrine evolved again. Now, the foreign influence to fear was communism. Any leader who put their people before U.S. profits and corporate interests was branded a communist puppet. The U.S. has used this as an excuse to pillage and plunder neighboring nations. And since the Cold War, the United States has backed countless coups and regime changes in Latin America. Now, let me take you back to Guatemala in 1954. Jacobo Arbenz is democratically elected, in his crime, land reform that threatened the U.S.-owned United Fruit Company. The CIA overthrows him, and what follows? 40 years of civil war. Then Chile in 1973, when Salvador Allende wins power at the ballot box. The U.S. destabilizes his economy, cheers his murder, and helps install Augusto Pinochet, a dictator who tortured countless people. And the list is long, and the pattern is honestly pretty undeniable. And this isn't some distant history either. It's the operating system that's still running today. Which brings us back to the present. The current administration doesn't even hide it. They cite the Monroe Doctrine to justify their meddling. They've even joked about it, calling it the Done Road Doctrine after kidnapping Venezuela's head of state and attempting regime change. So let's be for real here. What we are seeing is a 200-year-old idea that turns sovereign nations into an American birthright.
I'm sure by now y'all are really tired of hearing from me. So what I did was I compiled a list of people, real people that are actually on the ground right now. They're my reposts, they're my stories. These are people fighting in defense of their sovereignty, fighting in defense of their homeland. So if you feel like your For You page is stuck in Miami, Florida, click these, repost these, and listen and center the voices of people that would be affected by this horrible thing.
The protests against U.S. invasion in Venezuela right now are massive, even bigger than yesterday. The Venezuelan people are pouring into the streets right now and demanding the release of their president in massive numbers. But if you Google Venezuelans protest U.S. invasion, you won't get a single media article about the Venezuelans protesting. It's a complete media blackout. You can only find articles about Americans protesting or Venezuelan gusanos celebrating in Florida. The mainstream media is terrified that you will find out the truth of what Venezuelan people think about this U.S. invasion. They want you to believe the Venezuelans are celebrating when they're actually preparing to fight for their country. According to the most recent polling data, 90% of Venezuelans believe that their country should be defended by any means necessary. That's why they have to show you videos of people celebrating in Florida, because there's hardly anybody in Venezuela who actually wants this. And to the extent that they do exist in Venezuela, you can bet that they're getting money from the NED or the CIA. So share these videos far and wide and break the information blockade. Oligarchs like Elon Musk are constantly retweeting these fake videos of Venezuelans celebrating. Show people the truth. Show them what Venezuelans actually think about this. Let's not be lied into yet another disastrous regime change war like Iraq.
Maduro is out of here, you guys. We woke up to some excellent news. Of course, I'm ecstatic. As a Cuban woman, I feel like this administration has sparked the hope that the Cuban people lost years ago of Cuba ever being free. I know this has nothing to do with Cuba, but it's all interconnected. It really has sparked a hope that Cubans lost. Another note, of course, we have all the Trump-hating, miserable, frustrated, ignorant, know-nothing, fucking weirdo leftists who have something to say about this and have the most first grade level arguments about it too. It's about oil.
That fucking dog is smarter than you, lady. And yes, it is about fucking oil. But guess what? You should have zero hope of Donald Trump liberating Cuba. Do you know why? Because you motherfuckers have nothing to give him. Zero. It's the same fucking reason why he hasn't freed Puerto Rico. Because we have nothing more than they can take from us. You, as Cubans, have even less than Puerto Ricans to give to the United States. So what the fuck makes you think that somehow you're gonna be free from all this disaster? Donald Trump could give two shits about you. That is why the majority of you and the majority of Venezuelans got fucking sent away and kicked out of the United States by his administration. It's not gonna change anytime soon, I promise you that. I don't know what the fuck you people are putting in your arroz con gris. Que tengan buen día.
Congratulations to Venezuela. Felicidades a los venezolanos que están celebrando la liberación de su país. Venezuela has been freed from the clutches of a socialist dictatorship turned drug cartel that was refusing to cede power despite being voted out, including last year when Venezolanos went to great lengths to vote in a new government and to prove that Maduro had lost the election, and he still refused to cede power. I hope that the United States allows you to have another election and that they respect the results of your election. To my fellow American citizens that are giving their opinion on the internet about this and talking about Venezolanos as if they don't understand what's going on in their country or as if they don't understand what an American invasion is. This is a moment for Americans to honestly be quiet and inform yourself. Listen to what Venezolanos have to say. I'm going to link to some videos in the description of this video. Someone who is giving information that I feel is very informative. If you consider yourself to be someone intelligent and a critical thinker, take in more information. This is a time for you to listen more than you speak. I think a lot of Americans are likely experiencing some cognitive dissonance right now because at the same time that Americans are embracing socialism and the DNC is bending to socialists in the United States of America and a socialist is getting into the mayor's office in New York, Trump has liberated Venezuela from a socialist dictatorship. And I do not think it's a coincidence that Trump chose this moment to do that. I haven't been commenting on anything for the past couple of months because for a number of reasons. There are some personal things that have been going on and I've been working a lot. But also because I've just been watching and observing. I saw that press conference, that meeting that Trump and Mamdani had. And I was honestly laughing a lot because I saw one thing and then I saw the way that leftists and the leftist media described what happened there. And they acted like Mamdani bodied that, like he charmed the pants off of Trump. And I saw something very different. And everything Trump has done since then has validated what I got out of that. There's only one other creator on this app that I saw said partially what I saw there, but not all of it. And ultimately what's happened now, I think it was very strategic. I think the fact that he did that right now is very strategic. The fact that he's bringing Maduro to New York City is very strategic. I think all of it is intentional. And so, you know, I'm watching New Yorkers over here crying, acting like Mamdani is the second coming of Christ. I'm listening as the city council votes to give themselves a $30,000 pay increase and the mayor a $50,000 pay increase. And Mamdani's talking about hiring a lot more government workers and fully staffing these agencies. He's talking about seizing private property. There are videos of him on the internet talking about ending private ownership and seizing the means of production. I saw the videos of him going to a private landlord's property and showing the horrible conditions. The horrible conditions which are the result of a lot of socialist policies, by the way, because they have made it impossible for a lot of landlords to actually make enough money to take care of their properties. You know, he showed private owners, but he doesn't show Nitro, which is the worst landlord in New York City, who, by the way, refuses to make their violations public. If you go to a website called HPD Online, which is a city website, you can see the violations for all of the private properties in New York. But if you put in an address of Nitro, of a Nitro building, you cannot see their violations. They were taken to court because they are supposed to make their violations public. And even then, they only agreed to make violations public if they were mandated by the court to correct them, and only violations after September 2025. That's NYCHA, the landlord, the government landlord, okay? The city council approved COPA, which Adams then vetoed, but they passed it, COPA, which is meant to supposedly allow tenants to buy the properties they live in, which I agree with completely. I do not agree with nonprofits and government agencies being involved, because I've seen what it looks like when a nonprofit and HPD take over a property. They get 40-year tax, property tax, what do you call it? They don't have to pay property taxes for 40 years. And a lot of those properties are hellholes. HPD mismanages a lot of real estate. I've seen some of those properties, and I know some of those nonprofits are sued left and right because of the way they keep those properties. But you know what? You guys want to trust the government? I guess we're all going to learn the hard way. I think that the COPA Act is going to end up in the Supreme Court. There's something else that I think is going to happen, which it worries me. I don't even want to say it, but I think that's going to be the ultimate legacy of Mamdani's administration. And I worry for New York City because of it. I'm someone who has always voted Democrat because of the civil rights movement, because of women's rights, because of, Black Americans. I wouldn't vote Republican because they view women as property and they don't respect women's reproductive rights, and because of the racism, of course. But, I've experienced a lot of things in the last 3 years that have opened my eyes to things that I've heard a lot of Black American women say about the left, the misogyny and the racism of the left. As a second-gen American born here in New York City, my parents are immigrants from the Dominican Republic. I came here, I grew up in poverty. I grew up in the projects, right? My parents were extremely poor, 6th and 8th grade educations from the Dominican Republic. And I watched the way that people on the left talk about immigrants and about Latinos in particular, about how good we are for the economy and how Latinos just come here for a better life. And people like AOC, who want all undocumented people to have citizenship, and the Democratic Socialists of America, they want open borders, and they want undocumented people to have all the same rights as American citizens. And the city council in New York City that has voted repeatedly to allow non-citizens to have the right to vote in New York City, which Republicans successfully fought in the Supreme Court in New York State. I listen to leftists talk about Latinos as if we're dumb, as if we're a monolith, as if we don't know what's good for us. And I side-eye it because I've been to my parents' country. I've been to Brazil. I've been to Mexico. I want to go to more of Latin America. And when I visited those countries, I always think to myself, like, no one would ever leave these countries if the government was functional, if it weren't corrupt, if they had economic opportunity. No one would ever leave. So then Latinos are pushed into the United States on purpose. Why? Because we're good for the economy, right? Left to say we come here for a better life. Left to say that, they say these things about Latinos, and I think to myself, what better life? Latinas are paid the lowest wages of anyone in the U.S. A better life for who? For you, because you get cheap childcare and someone to clean your house for cheap. Latinos have the highest rates. First and second gen Latinos have the highest rates of depression in the United States. And then for those of us that have actually managed to make our way out of poverty and out of service jobs and find ourselves in white-collar jobs, we then have the privilege of experiencing leftist racism and classism, passive-aggressive bullying, right? If you know, you know. It's something that I've had to open my eyes to in the past couple of years when I realized that leftists like you when you're Latino, as long as you're not doing better than them. I have a perspective that I think only people that have been through similar experiences as me understand. But yeah, I've never voted Republican. I don't intend to. I find myself, I'm someone who, I am truly an independent thinker. I'm someone who can change my mind when I receive new information. And I'm in search of the truth. I research things for fun. It's enjoyable for me. I've shared some of it on this app. I'm not going to continue to share all of it. I've thought about it, but I'm not going to. I will share some of it moving forward. But I realize that not all of it is meant for the internet and for the audience that, unfortunately, a lot of that information attracts, because I've experienced a lot of racist and misogynistic abuse from Republican men and a lot of abuse from gay men and women of color on the left who don't appreciate me criticizing a brown man, because our communities, Latinidad and Asian brown people, have been conditioned to protect men at all costs, right? And so those of you that are still indoctrinated and are in line and docile want to also put me in line, because you don't like that I'm breaking the rule, right? That I'm betraying the communities, right? So I have to be very careful about what I share on this app. I've realized that. But I will tell you that Trump is definitely going to be doing a lot with New York City. He's going to. And I can't believe I'm even saying this, but because of what's happening in New York City with the socialist government, I am kind of relieved that we have a Republican Supreme Court right now, because that's going to be the only thing that stops this mess. The DNC is not. I can't believe that they're ceding to this nonsense, that they are giving into this. So anyway, congratulations, Venezuela. Good luck, America. Pray for us. Oh man, it's gonna be an interesting 4 years. That's all I have to say to that.
What the fuck is going on in Venezuela? If you're asking yourself that, then start here. Because Venezuela didn't just collapse, and the Maduro dictatorship didn't survive by accident. What this account does is break down exactly how power works in Venezuela, an autocratic regime built on hunger, corruption, fear, and international politics. On this page, I'll focus on 4 things. First, how Maduro survives. Second, how Venezuela got here, from Hugo Chavez to the present day. Third, how the United States intervenes through sanctions, military pressure, and negotiations. And fourth, the political opposition in Venezuela, including Maria Corina Machado and the movement that earned this year's Nobel Peace Prize. So if you want to understand Venezuela, start with a playlist called How Maduro Survives. And listen, this account is not here to tell you what to think. It's here to help you make sense of one of the most complex, confusing, and misunderstood political crises in the world today, and to help you draw your own conclusions.
Back in the 1960s, Venezuela as well as Norway both hit the jackpot and found massive reserves of oil in their country. But fast forward 60 years later, and both countries now look completely different. Norway is now home to the biggest piggy bank in the world, worth over $2 trillion, while Venezuela still has a massive amount of oil, but struggles to keep the lights on. And as you can see behind me, why did one country struggle while the other country thrive? And much of this has to do with bad political decisions. One thing that you understand is that Norway as well as Venezuela had a similar economy back in the 1960s, but Norway knew that flooding their market with oil money will cause inflation, or basically the Dutch disease. Instead, they did something that was completely radical at the time. They decided not to spend their money at all and invest every profit into a sovereign wealth fund, or basically a big piggy bank that earns interest. However, on the other hand, the leadership in Venezuela did the complete opposite, and they decided to spend everything on social programs, food, and even housing. This was great when oil prices were high, but the country struggled when prices were low. While Norway treated their oil business like a company, Venezuela did the opposite and turned it into a political tool. Back in 2003, the leader of Venezuela fired 18,000 oil workers and replaced them with loyal supporters who were very loyal but had no experience. The result is that Norway's oil infrastructure is now world-class, while Venezuela's is literally rotting. When oil prices crashed in 2014, the difference now became clear. Norway simply dipped into its $2 trillion piggy bank while Venezuela was fighting for its life. The lesson here is that it's not how much gold that you have in the ground, but how much sense you have in your government.
Want to learn about Venezuela? I'm getting the board. Whoever said teaching wasn't physical? Alright, people want to know about what's going on between the United States and Venezuela, but in order to understand what's going on today, you need to understand what has gone on before. That's why history is so important, guys. Come on. Venezuela and the U.S. I've decided to do this chronologically because I feel like doing history metaphorically difficult. Number 1, pre-1998. Pre-1998, Venezuela had a huge oil supply, actually biggest in the world, and the biggest stakeholder was a U.S. company called Exxon. Why is this important? Because of their huge oil supply in Venezuela, Exxon took it over. So the vast amount of profit, the percentage of profit, went to the U.S. and Venezuela as a country got next to nothing. And because of this, their economy started to fail. And as their economy started to fail, guess what? A dictator waiting in the wings wanted to jump in and save themselves from God knows who. Oh, from the United States. How do I get steak and oil companies just taking over the entire world? Number 2, 1998. That's not right. I hate it when I can't write numbers properly. Hugo Chavez was a democratically elected president of Venezuela. Now, once he got in, again I say democratically, he started to push towards authoritarianism, and he started reducing the checks and balances of the democratic system. Side point, does that remind you of anybody else? He also started to rewrite the Constitution to solidify his dictatorial power. Parallels are really uncanny. In 2002, a woman named Maria Machado, ignore how I said that, but keep that name locked in your head because she's going to be important later, created an organization called SUMAT in order to overthrow the Chavez government. Psst, who do you think was funding her operation? You guessed it. George W. Bush, President of the United States at the time, was funding her through the National Endowment of Democracy. You know what? People just make up names to mean anything nowadays. So through this National Endowment for Democracy, the United States funded Machado in order to overthrow Chavez. And when it didn't work, Bush said, "Not my problem, I didn't know anything about it." And she was eliminated from all political life going forward. And then, in 2002, Bush was a very busy guy. Number 4, in 2007, Chavez, reinvigorated with power and an authoritarian regime, decides to nationalize Venezuelan oil. Ruh-roh. That meant that Venezuela took all of Exxon's money, all their oil, and all their access to oil, and shifted the lion's share of profits back to Venezuela and left Exxon, well, not a lot of money. P.S. Exxon then sued and won $1.4 billion in a claim. But what kind of international police force are we going to get for Venezuela to be forced to pay Exxon? None. After that huge shift of economic power, Venezuelan oil dropped from 3 million barrels a day way down to 700,000 barrels a day due to corruption and, let's be honest, informal sanctions put on them by the United States because they just stole a bunch of their money from corporations. Stole might be a U.S. word, considering the oil was on Venezuelan land and considered a Venezuelan resource, but who's counting? The U.S. really does imperialism out of 10, don't they? Ooh, new chalk. Number 5, a guy named Maduro, used to be the VP of Chavez, takes over, and he starts building an even stronger authoritarian government. I forgot the year. 2013. Obama calls the drug cartel and this particular regime a threat to democracy and national security of the United States. That's then followed by Trump putting on economic sanctions in 2017. Are you with me so far? This is about to get interesting. Interesting, I mean even more corrupt. 6, 2025. I brought you right up to the present. Maria Machado, remember I told you to remember that name, wins the Nobel Peace Prize. And who does she dedicate it to? None other than Donald Trump. And it's at this point that Donald Trump begins attacking boats, Venezuelan boats, calling them drug cartels, talking about revitalizing and restoring democracy to Venezuela, and talking about how they're a threat to national security. And guess what? The U.S. got to go in and save some people. Oh, and P.S. Donald Trump wants his oil back. It's the ending that's really going to get you. The big question about why Donald Trump is doing this is why, and I think the answer is going to surprise you a little bit. Number 1, he is going to claim that he is going to liberate Venezuela. Guys, always be careful when the United States of America liberates anything, because usually it means they're going to take it. And he's going to install Maria as the president, formally excommunicated from all political life, but she's going to serve a purpose. Number 2, Machado will then give oil rights back to, you guessed it, Exxon. 80% goes to them, 20% back to Venezuela. Everybody's happy and a new power is installed, but that's not the only reason this is happening. This last one's gonna blow you away. Number 3. Is it about oil? Absolutely. They want control of the world's biggest oil supply, but that's not the full answer. What the real answer is U.S. currency rates. Follow along, this gets tricky. Oil has always been traded in US dollars, called petrol. And what that has served the United States in doing is solidifying, is stabilizing, is increasing US dollars. Because if anybody wants to buy oil anywhere in the world, they have to use US currency. It artificially inflates the price of the US dollar and stabilizes the US economy. This is the real problem. Because what Trump and the United States is really afraid of are BRICS nations. What are they? They are nations, they are countries that have gotten together and are starting to trade without the United States, especially oil, and not use the US currency as their trading denomination. And that is going to possibly submarine the US economy. So is it about oil? Sure, but what really it's about is about the United States being able to control the entire market of trade when it comes to oil, thus inflating and propping up the US economy. So when somebody says, is it about the oil? Say sure, but that's just a vehicle for them to control everything else.
¿Cómo te sientes? ¿Cómo te sientes?
Pues muy feliz.
Sí.
Porque nos liberaron por fin.
My mother celebrated the day that we got invaded in Iraq by the American government. She loved George W. Bush. She loved Tony Blair because they got rid of Saddam Hussein because he was annihilating the Kurds and so many minorities. But she didn't celebrate when she had to drag the body of her dead brother from my grandparents' driveway because the neighborhood got airstruck. A neighborhood that was never going to be airstruck. They're so wealthy, they're so protected, they're protected by the Americans because they've got ties with the Americans. Airstruck. My mother did not celebrate when the Americans bombed my school bus. My mother did not celebrate when we would go to school every day and she would say goodbye to us because she didn't know if we were going to come back. She didn't celebrate that we didn't have a healthy home. She didn't celebrate that we had to be internally displaced in Iraq at least 11 times in 6 years. The break in our education, the break in schooling, constantly failing because we cannot keep going to school because constantly political pressure and bombings and displacements are happening. She didn't celebrate any of that. She didn't celebrate when we had to leave Iraq at 2 a.m. because my dad's name ended up on a list. And she definitely did not celebrate when she had to become a Kurdish refugee in Turkey under the UN's thumb. And she definitely did not celebrate when we finally arrived to Australia, to a Western country, and she faced Islamophobia and discrimination and bigotry and oppression like she's never seen before. So no, the invasion of Venezuela is not to be celebrated because it's the next Iraq. We know what the play is. We know that they're for oil. We know that they're to destabilize and to extract what they want, and they're getting out of there.
United States military forces captured Saddam Hussein alive. He was found near a farmhouse outside the city of Tikrit in a swift raid conducted without casualties. And now the former dictator of Iraq will face the justice he denied to millions. The capture of this man was crucial to the rise of a free Iraq.
I'm gonna tell y'all like this. I work a lot. I have kids to feed. 3 of them, which equal like 1 kid, maybe a kid and a half. I told y'all this already. And I try to stay healthy, stay in the gym, stay active, touch grass and whoop-de-whoop. So I understand we all live totally different lives and we have a lot of shit on our plate, especially thanks to capitalism and shit, and patriarchy and whatnot. But please, and I am speaking to my black and my brown brothers and sisters at arms. If you are aware of the Black Panther Party, what happened to them, what their purpose was, and why the 3-letter organizations in this country could not let those purposes be fulfilled. The programs that were set in place to, and I quote, dismantle the Black Panther Party and to prevent the rise of a black messiah. The same thing goes for my Latinos in the brown berets. Fred Hampton, why did he have to meet his demise the way that he did? Michael Jackson, why did he have to meet his demise the way that he did? Muammar Gaddafi, remember that name. Muammar Gaddafi and why he had to meet his demise. What was he doing for his country of Libya? What was he doing? Because I know what I know about Muammar Gaddafi, regardless of the life that I'm living and yada yada and having to be in the rat race, after having to be a cog in the fucking machine, I'm going to do what the fuck I can to stay in tune with two people, learning about what they were doing for whoever they were doing it for, the sacrifices that were made, so on and so fucking forth. The richest man in Africa, Aliko Dangote. Remember that name, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Aliko Dangote, the richest man in Africa who's showing mad love to the country of Nigeria in terms of their crude oil infrastructure, manufacturing and shit like that. Coincidentally, something adjacent is happening in Venezuela, thanks to Nicolas Maduro, who just became president as of January 3rd, 2026. And you know what? Who did he have to run against? Some chick. Where do you think she came from? Who do you think is lining her pockets with money? Who planted her in that election? Why was it damn near a landslide victory in terms of the polls for Nicolas Maduro? Why did all the people, without any intervention of propaganda from the powers that be, the Western world, how did he become president? How did he win everyone over? Like Zohran Mamdani. What were his plans? What was his purpose? What was he communicating to his people of Venezuela? Same thing for Aliko Dangote. What were his plans for Nigeria as the richest man of Africa? And why was the Nigerian government so down with that? Where did they find use? Where did they find benefit in his plans? What were his plans in the first place? You know what I'm saying? What happened to Muammar Gaddafi in the past is in the past. But I'm sure there's a lot of 80s babies, early 90s babies who wanted to see this shit coming. Same thing with what happened in 2001, who might have been involved in shit. Before that, Desert Storm. Why were we in there? Why were we there? Shit like that, right? There are a lot of Americans that grew up in generations before Gen Z and Gen Alpha and shit that wish they could have seen this shit coming to at least be able to call a spade, point their finger and say, you lying motherfuckers. So that type of shit is happening right now with these two people, Aliko Dangote and Nicolas Maduro. Please read up on them with me. I'm doing the same shit. Stay in tune with them. Read up on them, get caught up to speed, figure out what's happening. Why was Nigeria attacked? Why was Venezuela attacked last night? Keep the fuck up. Because as we have seen from the ICE situation and how some of those ICE agents are former what? Former what soldiers from where? Injustice abroad will always make its fucking way back here. And I've said that 25 fucking times on my TikTok page in general. See it coming at the very least.
Just give me a little love. Who care about the Venezuela people? When you talk about Americans, especially those white ones and Israelis, they are the center of the world. You know, the Western media, every time they're talking about the whole world, they mean Western world. All the global South, our Asian, Latino, black people, we are not included. In their mind, we are just someone they need to conquer and enslave. That's all. Okay? So when they using their military power to kidnap the Venezuela president, American people, what they see is Venezuela people celebrating it. Okay, you can Google and find out all the news. Venezuela people celebrating their president got kidnapped by United States. That's how fancy their world is. The world they live in is different world from us. All right, all the Asian, black, and Latino, you must understand this. We are nothing. The white ones, at least 80% of white ones, they are the center of our world. They have better DNA. You know, I heard that from my ex. My ex is a half American, half UK man. And he told me he has better DNA 3 times. In the beginning, I thought he was just kidding. No, he wasn't. He meant it. When we trying to solve poverty, you know, making people have a decent life, these white Americans and Israelis, they are talking about why your country have no animal rights. You know, they are the people so advanced. They are shining. The hypocrite light just like glowing.
Hey, so what we're seeing in this timeline is a perfect example of the white male patriarchy, in that white men truly don't receive consequences for any of the fucked up shit we do as a collective. It empowers and emboldens white men to go out and do all of this fucking bullshit, knowing that the other part of the white male collective that doesn't agree with it is not going to hold them accountable. Because white men have the most power and privilege in this country. And if we don't put a stop to this violent, fucked up bullshit that fellow white men are carrying out, what the fuck, dude? I've been saying this. White supremacy was never a deal breaker for white people. Being a child predator was never a deal breaker for white people. And specifically, white men. And that's why white men are showing our ass as a collective, because it truly shows that white men don't give a fuck about doing the right thing ever, unless it benefits us.
I think it's very important for us to be tapped into this Maduro conversation and this spectacle for so many reasons, right? Absolutely. You know, what the hell is happening? How are they able to pop into a country? Yes, allegedly it was under the DOJ and these drug laws, but even that seems sketchy and like not a fully cogent like thought and strategy. They're more basing it on they can just do what they want to do and ask permission later. And again, that's egregious. And the conversation of how this impacts Venezuela and centering the voices of Venezuelans is essential in this conversation. This, for me, is an opportunity. We've spent so much time. I believe our presidential election in November of 2024 was based on world politics and the way that the candidates, specifically the candidates who were Democrat, engaged in and utilized their power and their impact in regards to world politics. And so many leftists online, you know, challenging people that if you don't have a global praxis to your approach and you don't have a quality approach, love it, got it. I've shared that some people don't have the capacity to have a praxis of what's happening on their block, but ashe. What is interesting for me right now that I really want folks to tap into is this is a moment to look at the way that they're navigating things at a global scale and absolutely how it directly can impact and shift the way they've been able to move in the United States, specifically around system impacted people. If they can pop into a country and snatch up a president, his wife, and I just watched the reporting from the courtroom. They beat and assaulted his wife pretty severely to the point that her attorney had to request medical care. Mind you, they've been in custody for days. Usually, if they gave a damn, they would at least have the person bandaged, so on and so forth. There's a level of shenanigans afoot in this, right? It seems as though they're going to allow them to have a due process. They do have an attorney. The attorneys have not asked for them to get bail or for that to be reviewed. And they want to look at the discovery. Discovery is where you can see the evidence that has allowed them. A lot of people don't discuss, yes, at the federal level, they have an indictment process, but they have it at the state level as well. And historically, the indictment process is a fail-proof way for people to implement some sort of charge, because what they say is if a prosecutor throws something against the wall in an indictment situation, they likely are going to get what they're looking for. So you wait for the discovery to see what the hell is going on, because grand jury transcripts are not always available to folks, right? That being said, they're waiting for the discovery, and there are areas where Maduro as a sovereign has some protections and can't be charged with some things. They're charging him with gun charges. Were these guns that he had in the like what is the context of this? But if they're doing this to presidents, regardless of how the president was implemented, what do y'all think they're gonna do to people on the ground? What y'all think they're gonna do when it comes to RICO cases? Because there's no way that they think the drugs that are being brought into this country from Venezuela, that they're saying it went to white people. Because when it's drugs and white people and fentanyl, they have memorial services and pages, and they pass laws, and they figure out how to have, drug court and out of jail placement and services and supports. They not gonna say that Timmy is getting, because y'all shot down one boat allegedly, where everything else is coming to. And if this turns into a RICO situation, how do you think this is going to impact black and brown folks? And again, this man is a president. Like the reporter was like, it's interesting to watch him still move and speak as if he's the president. I mean, he's been kidnapped, but there ain't been no re-election. He still is the president of this country. She's still the first lady. I also heard that the son was arrested as well. But this is what they own. So what happens to people on the ground? Also, he's being held at the detention center in Brooklyn. If y'all don't know, when special cases or highly visible cases come into institutions, everything is shifted on its axis. You already have these institutions where they don't have enough staff to support the people who are there already. That's why people aren't getting rec time. People aren't getting visitation. People aren't getting time, phone. Some people are showering once or twice a week, right? So what happens when, even if y'all put him in protective custody, what are y'all gonna do? So you likely will have institutions who will be on lockdown because they probably don't want people near him sharing any sort of information. There's all sorts of levels to this. It was interesting that he spoke only in Spanish in his hearing, which he has the right to do, but I'm going to assume he can speak English. I think that was a clear decision. But they're setting the tone. They're setting the tone. We can snatch up presidents. You can come into somebody's hood and people can just disappear. Like that's like, of course they've been doing this with undocumented folks. We've known that. I just want the black and brown folks who think this is cute and think this is sweet and think this don't apply to them to know that they don't create a template without a purpose. They don't set precedents without a purpose. They don't roll the dice in this big of a way without a purpose. They scaled back the PREA protections several weeks ago. I wrote an article on this for News One. I'm going to do another video that dives into that deeper, but check that out. Please, my God, the Palestinians, the children, absolutely. There are enslaved people on this land. And all of this hokey pokey, all of the donors, all the funds that were going to support system impacted people, people are trying to figure out how to toe the line and support people in their neighborhoods. Like, I can't even fathom how these dollars are shifting and how, what the response is of community-based dollars to address these issues and support these folks. But I need people to pay attention. Call your people if they on inside. Check on your people. If you know your people is down there at that jail, write those letters. Make sure, see what supports they're getting. Call that jail and make sure that they're getting the things that they're supposed to be getting. Because they didn't think this through. My last thing is, it's interesting that they were able to put together this indictment with this president, but he tried it with James Comey, with my good sis, who's the state's attorney in New York. Oh boy, I'm blanking on the older gentleman with the mustache. I think his stuff is still in flux. But Trump had a list of enemies he meant to get, and he lost 2 out of 3. So what y'all gonna do if this falls through and you've put on this big performance? And then what position does that put us in? Where y'all want to portray it as everyone in Venezuela is in support of this, when it doesn't look like everyone is. And those who are still afraid of, this tyrant is out, who's the next tyrant, and why is this tyrant making it seem as if he has the right to hold the line in the meantime? What they do to the most privileged, you need to multiply that times 10 for what they will do to the most marginalized, whether they were born on this land or not. Because again, they don't create standard operating procedures for nothing.